November 15, 1973. Rouse Restaurant, East Harlem. 8:30 p.m. The most powerful crime boss in American history walked through the front door, and every conversation stopped. Lucky Luciano was 76 years old, gray-haired, and moved with the careful steps of an elderly man. But his eyes still had the cold intelligence that had made him untouchable for 50 years. At a corner table sat Frank Lucas, 43 years old, wearing a modest suit and eating alone like he always did. Frank looked up from his pasta and recognized the man who had created modern organized crime. The man who should have been dead for 11 years, but was somehow standing 10 feet away, studying him with predator's eyes. "Frank Lucas," Lucky said quietly. "I've been hearing interesting stories about you." Frank stood up slowly, showing respect but not fear. "Mr. Luciano, I thought you were dead?" Lucky smiled. "So did everyone else. That was the point." This was the meeting that never happened in real history, but should have changed everything. The creator of the commission system facing the man who had made the commission irrelevant. The architect of traditional organized crime confronting the genius who had built something better. For 11 years, the world had believed that Lucky Luciano died of a heart attack at Naples Airport in 1962. His funeral was attended by crime bosses from around the world. His death was reported in newspapers internationally. The man who had revolutionized organized crime was buried with full honors in New York. But Lucky Luciano hadn't died. He'd disappeared. The heart attack had been real, but not fatal. Lucky had survived, recovered, and made a decision that would define his final years. He would let the world believe he was dead, while he watched what happened to the empire he'd created. From his secret compound in Sicily, Lucky observed the American underworld evolving beyond his control. The commission system he'd established was working, but it was also limiting. The five families were prosperous but predictable. They'd become bureaucratic, cautious, and vulnerable to the kind of innovation that Lucky himself had represented in the 1930s. Then Lucky heard about Frank Lucas. Reports filtered back from New York about a black criminal who was operating completely outside the traditional system. No territorial agreements, no tribute payments, no respect for established boundaries. This Frank Lucas was moving massive quantities of merchandise without anyone's permission and generating profits that made the five families look like amateurs. Lucky was intrigued, then concerned, then fascinated. By 1973, Lucky realized that Frank Lucas represented everything Lucky himself had been 40 years earlier, a revolutionary who saw opportunities that established criminals missed. Frank was doing to the commission system what Lucky had done to the old Sicilian bosses. Lucky decided it was time to meet his successor. "Sit down, Frank," Lucky said, taking the seat across from him. "We have things to discuss." Frank remained standing. "With respect, Mr. Luciano, I don't take orders from ghosts." Lucky's eyes flashed with something between amusement and annoyance. "Ghosts? Boy, I've been watching your operation for 2 years. I know about your Vietnam connection. I know about your Blue Magic branding. I know about your family-only management structure. You've built something impressive. But you've also built something that threatens what I spent my life creating." Frank sat down, intrigued despite himself. "The commission system? That's ancient history. The families are slow, predictable, and greedy. They tax innovation instead of encouraging it. I built something better." "Better?" Lucky leaned forward. You built something isolated. The commission creates stability. Your operation creates chaos. When you fall, and you will fall, everything you built dies with you. When I created the commission, I built something that would outlast any individual. Frank smiled coldly. Your commission works for Italians who want to control territory through violence and intimidation. My system works for anyone smart enough to see opportunities and disciplined enough to stay invisible. Your way creates wars. My way avoids them. Lucky studied Frank with growing respect. You really think you've improved on what I created? I know I have. Your system requires constant meetings, territorial agreements, and shared decision-making. It's democratic, but it's also slow. My system is autocratic, but efficient. While your commission families spend months debating decisions, I've already implemented, tested, and refined 3 new strategies. Lucky laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in years. Frank, do you know why I really faked my death? Frank waited. Because I got tired of babysitting grown men who couldn't make decisions without committee meetings. I created the commission to prevent wars, but I also created a bureaucracy that strangles innovation. You've built something I wish I'd built. Frank wasn't expecting this. So what do you want from me? Lucky's expression turned serious. I want to make you an offer. The families don't know I'm alive, which means they don't know I'm still controlling certain assets. European suppliers, Sicilian networks, Caribbean money laundering operations, resources you could use to expand globally. And in exchange, you teach them how to operate like you operate. Efficiently, invisibly, profitably. You help me modernize the commission system before it becomes completely obsolete. Frank considered the proposal. Lucky Luciano was offering him access to established international criminal networks that had taken decades to develop. But he was also asking Frank to compromise the independence that had made him successful. What if I refuse? Frank asked. Lucky's voice dropped to the tone that had once terrorized the most dangerous men in America. Then you'll discover that dead men can still be very dangerous to living ones. Frank met Lucky's stare without flinching. Mr. Luciano, with all due respect for what you accomplished, I'm not one of your 1940s soldiers. I don't respond to threats. I respond to logic. And the logic is this. Your system worked for its time, but times have changed. I've adapted. You haven't. Lucky smiled again, but this time there was steel behind it. Frank, you're about to learn something I learned 40 years ago. Being right doesn't matter if you're not strong enough to enforce being right. You've built an impressive operation, but you've built it alone. When the government comes for you, and they will come for you, you'll have nobody to rely on but yourself. That's exactly how I prefer it. Then you're more foolish than I thought. Lucky stood up slowly. The families are already planning to move against you. They see you as a threat to their territorial agreements. The federal government is building a case that will destroy your organization completely. You think independence makes you strong, but it actually makes you vulnerable. Frank remained seated. And your commission makes the family strong? It makes them sustainable. When one family faces government pressure, the other 4 provide support, resources, and protection. When you face government pressure, who helps you? Frank had no answer for that. Lucky reached into his jacket and placed a business card on the table. Think about my offer. You have innovation, but I have infrastructure. You have efficiency, but I have longevity. Together, we could create something that combines the best of both systems. Frank looked at the card without picking it up. And if we can't work together? Lucky's final words as he walked toward the door were quiet but clear. Then we'll discover which system is really superior. Old school networking or new school independence. Traditional power or modern efficiency. My way or your way. Frank watched Lucky Luciano walk out of Rao's restaurant, knowing he'd just been challenged by the most dangerous criminal in American history. A man who had supposedly been dead for 11 years, but was somehow very much alive and very interested in Frank's operation. The meeting set in motion a chain of events that would have changed criminal history forever. Lucky began coordinating with federal law enforcement to bring down Frank's operation, not out of malice, but out of philosophical disagreement. Lucky believed criminal organizations needed structure, cooperation, and shared responsibility. Frank represented the opposite philosophy, individual brilliance operating without constraints. Lucky's information, combined with Detective Richie Roberts' investigation, accelerated Frank's downfall. Instead of facing federal prosecution alone, Frank found himself fighting a war on two fronts, against law enforcement and against the most cunning criminal mind of the 20th century. Frank's arrest in January 1975 came not just from police work, but from Lucky's strategic maneuvering. The old master had systematically undermined Frank's sources of protection, isolated his organization, and created the conditions for his capture. But Lucky's victory was Pyrrhic. Frank's cooperation with federal authorities provided information that implicated not just Frank's organization, but also the commission families that Lucky had spent decades protecting. Frank's betrayal destroyed both his own empire and Lucky's carefully maintained system. Lucky Luciano died for real in December 1975, watching from his Sicilian compound as both his commission system and Frank's innovation were dismantled by federal prosecutors. The two greatest criminal minds in American history had destroyed each other through their inability to compromise. The meeting at Rao's restaurant proved something that both men should have understood. Criminal genius is most dangerous when it faces other criminal genius. Lucky and Frank were too similar in their intelligence and too different in their methods to coexist peacefully. If this story of generational conflict and criminal evolution moved you, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like if you understand that sometimes the greatest enemies are the most similar people. Share this with someone who knows that progress often requires destroying the past. What would you have chosen, Lucky's stability or Frank's innovation? Let me know in the comments below.